Hey, good morning. Good morning, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube. What's going on? Kyle Burt here, dialed in with Eric Yancy. What's going on, Eric?
Good morning, Kyle. Hey,
Morning, sir.
yeah,
Uh,
surviving through.
yeah, absolutely. So, before we kick off the show, just want to say hello to people that are tuning in. Let us know where you're watching from. If you're watching this live or watching the replay, let us know down below. And how are you guys doing this morning? So how are you doing this morning, Eric, with all the news? Like it seems like we get through one horrible thing and now we're in another horrible thing, you know?
Yeah, it does. There's a lot of memes out there right now where 2020 is I guess anti-human as it would be. It's a lot of things going on. Some of it self-inflicted, some of it by nature, and it's just an interesting time.
Yeah, it is. And we're gonna touch on that today. We're gonna talk about contact. I keep on saying wanting to say contract. Contact
That's
tracing and privacy, and kind of how it relates to the protesting that's going on. So if you're new here, if it's the first time you're tuning into us, welcome. We are recording a live podcast here, so this beginning stage here, we're just chit chatting, just welcoming people in. We'll kick off the show in just a second, and we'll get into the root of the conversation. So I see a couple people joining on LinkedIn now. So hello, and Eric, you ready to do this?
as ready as I'll ever be, I guess, huh?
All right, cool.
So
Let's do it.
yeah.
Here we go. Let me play the intro. There will always be somebody stronger, faster, and smarter than you. Surviving depends on your adaptability to change. Those who are the most adaptable are dialed in. Welcome to Dialed In. Kyle Burt here, your host, and I'm joined by Eric Yancy, the Information Security Officer for the City of Irving. Eric, are you ready to get dialed in?
I am ready to get dialed in, Kyle.
Awesome. Let's do it. So I understand that you're the most dialed into today after extensive research the past couple of days into contact tracing and privacy.
Yes, I'm impressed, right? How about having a contract about contacts?
I said it right this time.
I
Contact,
know.
not contract.
Well, so like I have to most of the times, I need to just say, what we're talking about today is Eric Yancy, a security professional, not representing the city of Irving, and some of the thoughts, opinions are mine, not theirs. So get mad at me, not Irving. But one of the nice things about being in information security is for over 20 years is seeing just different trends that are going on and different things that are happening and how that relates to this particular profession. And when we take a hacker mentality on everything, and I use the hacker term as it was originally meant, not today's words that say it's bad. Hacking is trying to dissect and understand. It's an inquisitive nature. When you have that mindset, you start looking at things that other people would see are benign and go, this could go bad south really quick. And when I started hearing about how they are ramping up contact tracing, it's been doing contact tracing for a long time. These are certain diseases, STDs. They do this where they have interviews and so forth. So this is nothing new. But because of the scope of the recent COVID environment that we're having, it's impractical to be able to get that many boots on ground. So they're looking at electronic ways of doing this. And so back to the kind of the hacker mentality, it's not what should something do, right? It's what can it do? And when you start looking at just the mindset, the methodology around contact tracing, it sounds like it's a great tool, but when you start talking about privacy,
well, first off, what is it like? How are they? What is contact tracing? If we're just completely like kindergarten level, like have no clue what you're talking about. Like, what is it? Like, we can imagine it, but like, how is it working?
Well, I'm gonna take a page off the marketing slick and tell you what they think it is, right? So what contact tracing is when an individual is identified as having, in the case of this, the context of this discussion, COVID. We know that they may be asymptomatic. They may be contagious prior to showing symptoms. So what you do is you say this person has been exposed. But what we need to find out is all the people that they've been around over the previous 2 weeks. to either, identify them and let them know, or you provide some type of testing for them or so forth. So what contact tracing is, it's basically, one of those the 6 layers of contact it would be, where a person gets to a barber shop, and that barber had COVID-19. So all these customers then need to be contacted and say, hey, be aware. And that the goal, and it's important, it's not preventing, right? What it is, it's at that point, it's driving by the rear of your mirror. So now you're going to the people that may have been exposed and try to reduce as the spike, right? They're trying to level it out so that not everybody, if you don't know, you go out there and you start getting infecting. So that's what it's trying to do, is, lower the curve, identify quickly who may have been impacted, do self-isolation, or get them treatment. So that's the premise of contact tracing. And as I said, they've been doing this where, for certain diseases already, the Department of Health and Human Services. So, if you want to be notified when you've been impacted by a potential event. So good stuff, right?
Right. Yeah.
But
and now enters the privacy concerns.
Right. So traditionally, they would have somebody in a government agency going out and doing phone calls, interviews, face to face, letting them know. But there's usually this human interaction, right? So it's somebody who can give kind of a litmus test of what's their likelihood of exposure and so forth. So the privacy concerns are when you start automating and you start getting it into an electronic form. Now, without even going, I want to get to the privacy concerns, but let's just talk about practicality, right? So we are still trying to understand, and I say we, not me, but the health organizations of the world are trying to understand what this virus is, right? How is it, we get different directions where, okay, wear a mask, don't wear a mask. Oh, it's going to be sitting on a hard surface for 72 hours. No, it doesn't live for another hour. And I think this kind of varies. So even understanding the way that this virus spreads becomes very difficult. And when you start automating contacts, it's mired with problems. So, and you talk about, is it an accurate way of doing it? Now, one of the solutions that have been put out by Amazon and Google, which is currently being used by multiple states, is it's a low energy Bluetooth, right? So your cellular device has a randomly generated long string, okay? And as you get towards somebody else, which also has that application, it will transfer its ID to you and your ID back to it. So if you look at your phone, all it has is a list of, call it hashes, right? So it's got this list of hashes, and it really doesn't have any PII. I mean, what is it, right? But what they're doing is then they're saying we're going to decentralize the collection of that data onto everybody's mobile device. So then what you do is you domino, right? Where you say this device with this number has contacted over the last 2 weeks the following devices. And then I don't know who it is, right? I just know device names. And then what it'll do is it'll go back to a centralized place, and it's going to have to normalize the data. So it's going to say, okay, here's the list of those unique identifiers, and this is who that means, so that we can start notifying those people, or at least the theory is for the Bluetooth is actually just pop up notifications on SMS. Hey, your phone has been in contact with other phones. We don't even know who you are, but here you go.
And how do they know whose device is whose, right?
Just by that unique identifier, right? So there's no PII collected in the Bluetooth.
Are they working with the carriers? How are they, or Apple, Android? How are they identifying that?
Well, here's the first here's a problem. It's only as good as the number of devices that have that installed, right? So if I have my COVID app and I'm walking around a room of 30 people and I'm the only one who has a COVID app, the other 29 people aren't going to give me their code. There's no code to give. So
you have to have that app open anyway. Are you talking about the one that Apple and Google worked on?
Yeah, they say, so what Apple and Google did is they love it. They punted. They said, we're going to give you an API, and the API is going to generate these strings, and it's going to allow you, the coder, to do your voodoo. But we're not going to get involved in that because we understand the cluster that can go to, right? We understand the PII. We understand GDPR, California's Protection Act. Well, Of course, eager beaver, we're going to go out and we're going to design our own. Now, the first thing is, how do you get everybody to install it? Now, iOS and Android, two largest demographics or operating systems out there. So what you know is what you know. Is that application or functionality going to be integrated into an update to the Android and iOS? I don't know. And I don't want to be a fear monger. I'm just saying, if you think it's unheard of that apps are installed behind the scenes that you're not aware of, you really need to, this is reality, kind of bang those rocks together, you'll make fire, because that's just the case, right? So it's not currently being, promoted that way. But again, the viability of this and the functionality of this is requiring you to have it distributed. Problem one, distribution. The second is, and we talk about the different methodologies. So the United States is a world leader in a lot of things. Unfortunately, it is one of the lowest first world entities that does not have a federal privacy law, right? So everything is basically about the 50 states have their privacy protections, the breach notifications law. But when it comes to, and I say that there are some, right? You got your Telecommunications Act of 1902 and all those things. I'm just saying, in general, United States citizen has to rely on it. So when the federal government is involved in this COVID-19 and they start going into, okay, we're not going to develop an app, we're not going to create a standard, we're not going to give you oversight. Every state is on its own. That's their current position on it. So now I've got potentially 50 different apps, right? So I'm in Texas and I go to Oklahoma. Is the app that Oklahoma made compatible? Is there interoperability? It just becomes this cluster of this mesh. It's not centrally managed. So now, rather than, and if you're into to security, single sign-on is, kind of the big moat and drawbridge to the castle, right? So yes, there is one single big thing, but I can protect it with all my army versus having a whole bunch of windows, right? So I'm not advocating that the federal government needs to stick their nose into everything and everything else, but at least I'd like to have one target rather than right now 50 targets where I'm going to have to do assessments on, okay, did somebody in Idaho develop an app that has privacy concerns and so forth. So there's right. So now you got 50 different things going out there rather than one, which it is what it is. The second is, how is it going to be distributed? But then we start talking about the Patriot Act, right? 9/11, horrific. In the United States, reacted and responded, right? The reaction of it was, we're going to start implementing through a federal law, monitoring of U.S. citizens like has never been done before. Matter of fact, it was illegal before. Well, 20 years later, right? That's applications are still there. Now, whether you like Edward Snowden or not is irrelevant. The fact is he exposed illegal activity that was done by the United States government against their citizens. And because of that, there has been a lot of, oversight, right? And things happen. So if anybody thinks that these tracing applications are just going to automatically go away, right? It's like pouring a ladle of sewage into a bottle of wine or something. It's like, you know what? It's not just going to dissipate on its own. Now you got a whole bottle of sewage, right? So the thing that concerns me is without that oversight, without the security protections, and without a reason to disassemble, dismantle, to once the COVID has gotten a vaccine or it's under control, the wonderful butterflies and unicorns were going to say, well, they'll just remove the data. They're not going to use it anymore. Again, welcome. Yeah. Oh, come on, please, really. So
if you guys are just joining us right now, we're talking about contact tracing and privacy. And what Eric is referring to is these apps that have been installed on our phones, that we've been installing on our phones to help with COVID-19 contact tracing, and how that's actually playing into the next topic here, which is how that's playing into the protests that are going on today as well. But But yeah, like you said, basically it's Pandora's box, right? Like once you open this, like you're not going to put things back into the box, right? Now that you give access to the government to do the contact tracing based on Bluetooth, these the low Bluetooth signals, how are they going? They're going to what are they going to do with that next?
Right. Well, see, so and the Amazon Google API model is one model, and it's also, this is where I'm gonna dive a little bit into the security concerns. No, let me talk about the second option, and because it's the security issue is for both. The other side of it is using one of two functionalities, but they're both centrally managed, not on the cell phone. And in that centralized environment, what they're doing is they're using your GPS of your phone and cell phone towers to triangulate you with a fairly good accuracy. Now, there's two subsets to that. One is I'm going to design and develop an application that directly connects into your system, to your mobile device, and it's going to directly, contact the centralized servers, right, through mobile and or Wi-Fi. Now, there's battery issues with that. There's other things that go along with that. But here's the concern is, so one is directly connecting. The second is utilizing current license agreements that you've already accepted and haven't read, like Foursquare, like Facebook, like all those that says, I'm giving you authorization to track where I'm at so that I can get relevant advertisements based on my location, so that I can share the fact that I'm eating a hot dog with 4,000 people because it's important, right? So that you may not even know that you've already granted permission, because now Foursquare is, and I'm saying Foursquare is providing that data to COVID tracers right now on several states' applications. So you didn't even have to go, okay, I'm gonna, and by the way, privacy policies usually say you are going to use the information that I'm providing you for only the purpose that I gave it to you. Well, again, this is brand new and it hasn't been vetted. There is no precedent. There's no legal structure to say, well, Foursquare.
Do you even use Foursquare anymore? I
mean, I'm old school.
I remember I signed up for Foursquare too, because it was like, what year was it? Like probably 2008, 2009, something like that. Signed up for it. Cool. We used it for a while, and then like technology evolved, and I moved on. I deleted it.
Okay. So I access Foursquare on my Prodigy account, right?
Yeah, it's right there with my MySpace account somewhere.
Oh my God, yeah. There's a phantom.
But yeah, no, that's interesting, right? Because like all these apps come out, and we always just say like, yeah, approve, whatever, because you have to in order to use the app. Like you have no choice. You want to use the app, you just, of course you do. Approve all.
Well,
right?
So now, but that also is so now we have the Bluetooth thing, which is contact to contact. We have the GPS thing, which is centrally managed, but that becomes your actual location, and then becomes a whole huge centralized, ripe inventory of data. Now, here's a beautiful thing. Think about COVID-19. You're infected with COVID-19. That's HIPAA. That is a health information. Now you associate health information. Now on the API functionality, it's just your code, right? So when argues that I don't know who you are, I don't care who you are, this code and that code match, and they just do codes. But when you talk about centralized location, now it's going to be where you're at, where you visit, who you are. And trust me, I'll give you an example here, but there's some countries that are actually, it's horrific the amount of data that they're collecting to do the tracing. So my point is this, that now you have HIPAA information. Now that can be used in a myriad of ways, in the bad ways, right? So, you now, there's some organizations right now that are in China where you have to show the status of your app. It's red, green, and yellow. And if you're yellow, you're not allowed in. If you're green, you can go in. So now you could almost just identify, you only serve those people who you want to that are based on this app. If you don't have the app, but in China, it's mandatory. But if you don't have the app, you're not allowed in. So you actually can basically stop service to certain demographics because certain demographics have been impacted higher for COVID-19. This becomes a huge issue, right? And so those concerns are there. And if I go back to, data destruction, how long should this data be collected? What data can be collected? And again, there's no federal regulation to guide this entire tracing. So it's the Wild West. So the other things that
so you get COVID. Now you have a scarlet letter, and what they
yes.
do with that, who knows? So even if I do get COVID today, why would I want you to know that? I mean, for the
Mhm.
betterment of society, perhaps, but then the implications beyond that, no, right?
Well, and here's and listen,
Like
I'm
me,
not trying.
I'm saying it right now. Like me, like I wouldn't want you to know now.
Right. No, so here's the problem, right? And whether you're a pro mask, no mask, open up the economy, it's irrelevant. The point is this: we have seen through the COVID mask requirements, the number of people, and by the way, the masks, the current status as of 8:21 a.m. is the mask isn't for you, it's for them, right? So it prevents you from infecting others by spitting and sneezing, but it doesn't really help you. The germs are going to come in anyway. So given the choice of protecting others and compassion for others around you, I hate to say, I mean, look what's happening. People are getting, shot, broken arms because they're like, you're not going to make me wear a mask because I don't care about you. It's all about me. And so the probability of somebody installing an application that, like you said, it's going to provide a scarlet letter to them. There's not going to be an immediate benefit to them, right? It's only going to be on tracing and it's for the other people. The probability of success is unfortunately, I mean, it's low, right? So, and again, I'm not a negative person, but I'm a pragmatist, right? So I understand the fact that even like you said, we're good people, we're nice people, but do I want to come around with that scarlet letter on my head for the rest of my life? Because then I'm going to tell you, data doesn't go away. Patriot Act, 20 years later, we're still surveying, citizens. So, but here's another thing. It's beautiful when you talk about, and we're getting into the privacy concerns, but
Yep.
so say I wanted a competitive advantage against my, and again, I'm not asking what should it do, what can it do? So I want to go ahead and indicate that I'm infected. Okay, so just for kicks and giggles, I'm not going to walk into, say, a competitor, and I'm going to hang around their foyer for a while. Well, now everybody who I've come in contact with could, if it's an automated, API or GPS, it's not human interaction, is going to suddenly be identified as potentially being impacted. So I just took your customers out of your foyer, and now they're self-isolating and or mandatory quarantine. That's crazy. Well, how about this? Election coming up, and we know that foreign nationals will not interfere with the United States democratic process because it's the best, structure for government in the world, right?
Right.
So I'm going to go hang out at a voting center, and I'm going to say everybody who votes, even whether I'm infected or not, is irrelevant, right? It's going to be that I'm going to identify myself as being infected, and then therefore, basically, everybody who's voted at that particular place could potentially be automatically notified. And again, we don't know a lot about this virus. We know a little, but not a lot. So that, when two phones come in contact with each other, right? Does that automatically mean that I'm infected if you were infected? No. I mean, there's so many variables, right? It's distance. Do I have a mask on?
That's probably the closest thing we have from a data point to suggest that there's a possibility, right? So that's why they're gonna go in on that.
Well, I think what we should do, there's a hybrid, right, where we could identify those that have been in contact, and then from there, bring it into a human who has the ability to make those decisions, right? So there isn't I think, a complete technical solution to this without having a significant amount of false positives. Now, I would challenge your audience. Who here has not been notified at least once about a data breach and that your financial information will be, reviewed for a year, right? If you become
now, it's like, oh,
yeah,
cool. I got another one. Cool.
you're tone deaf. You're tone deaf, right?
Yeah.
Okay. How many times do I have to be notified that, oh yeah, 45 people I contacted in the last week have COVID-19. You need to self-quarantine. Well,
I hate to say it, but it's like the Amber Alerts. You get an Amber Alert, like we get one, like we just got one yesterday. We get one like every couple of days. It's like, I mean, it's a terrible thing, but like you start to become like almost tone deaf to it, immune to it. Like, okay, there's another one, another one, another one.
So I'll go back and say, so let me give you, Eric, methodology 101. I think technology exists for a single purpose, and that is to fulfill a business process or a mission, right? So that's why technology is there. COVID, right? Mapping. Information security exists to make sure that the technology is working the CIA, confidentiality, integrity of that technology so that it meets the business need, right? So if the security environment isn't aligned with what the business does, you're going to second generation fail, right? You're going to be a commodity. You're going to secure things that don't need secured. You're not going to secure other things. So when I start looking at my job as an information security officer and even as a CISO is to align how you can protect the data and systems so it can meet the mission. So if you, as the security professional, don't know what that mission is, you're not doing your job. And so when I look at these COVID tracing, I have to look at what is the mission. And when I start seeing things, it's a little bit outside of security, the lane, but it's important to go, okay, wait a minute. If your purpose is to identify those who have been potentially impacted and mitigate or reduce the exposure to other people, the fact that there's a bunch of false positives, it's not going to be installed unless you force it, and then it's going to be a huge, publicity issue. We don't know enough about the virus. All these things combined to go, you know what? After all this heartache and headache, it's not going to do what you want it to do anyway. I don't think the success of the COVID tracing applications are going to be worth the risk. Now, that's a decision that each individual is going to have to make or get made for them by, like Google or governments. But I guess my point is that if you go back to what they're trying to accomplish, there are a lot of research going on right now. This is new, right? The tracing applications are still in development.
Yeah.
Well, but I will tell you.
Well, Nick Kroll, thank you for this. I put his comment up on the screen here. This is how to activate COVID-19 exposure notifications on your iPhone through the latest iOS update from Business Insider. So simply updating your iOS to the newest might actually opt you in.
Well, but here's your question was I love it. It was eloquent. You're going to use the app, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So Foursquare, right? Here's something.
You got to use.
You have a choice. You either don't update your operating system of your phone, or you just accepted that you're now going to be installed. How many people now are going to make that choice to say, you know what, we live by mobile at this point, right? Everything.
Yeah.
And so if we start making choices of whether or not we can use a smartphone or not, because of it's going to trace every moment you make. Now, by the way, if people don't think that's happening now, they're idiots, right? All the applications you install have their the use laws, right? End user licensing agreement that says we're going to track you, everything else. And everybody always hits.
Yeah. How many people are going to be like, here, you can take this iPhone back, give me a flip phone? How many people are actually going to say that?
Right. And again, I say you probably already gave that permission and don't realize it, right? So it's not like they're going to have to require you like iOS, right? They track who you are. I mean, Find My Phone, with the Life 360, all those apps are there already. So it's not like a big stretch. Now, the misuse of data, I love it. I talk to marketing and salespeople all the time, and they have this strange reality that says everybody's, like I said, unicorns and rainbows. It's like, yes, it's a hammer. It builds houses, and you're right. It's a bludgeoning tool as well. And they look at you like, well, nobody would do that. I'm like, history has shown otherwise. So all this data that's collected, it's for a good purpose. But I think every technology that's used for good is once it has that single purpose, most of the time is used for nefarious uses, well and above what it's supposed to be used for. Now, one of the things I'd like to you target in and focus in on is the data is still new. The applications are still being developed, but I'll give you a great example how it's already being misused. Okay, we know about the Mr. Floyd's tragic death, and because of that, there's now riots throughout the world and in the United States. Minneapolis, and I want to share this article. It really resonates with what we're discussing right now. So this is an article on CNET. Give credit where credit's due here by Alfred. Contact tracers concerned police tracking protesters will hurt COVID-19. They've already started using the contact tracing applications to trace the associations of the protesters to organizations that are known to have kind of extreme views, right? But so the problem is, and it's stated here by the Health and Human Services, the biggest hurdle is gaining public trust, which, by the way, I would never, ever trust that anyway, but that's just my own personal opinion. But the public safety commissioner said that the police are starting to contact trace the demonstrators they were arrested. So here is within Minnesota, and I said that right, Minnesota. There's a conflict of interest where the data that is supposed to be used for contact tracing so that we can help the health and well-being of our citizens already being used for nefarious purposes. And I say nefarious, for unapproved purposes that transcend the scope of what it was meant for. Now, there's one example. There's thousands more that we probably don't even know about. And so
there's more coming, I'm sure.
Right. And if you go to again a sharing app, I wanted to show you another article on my screen here. And this article is from 10, how the coronavirus is driving new surveillance programs around the world. And this is by Dave Gershard. Sorry about that. And in it goes to each country. And in each country, it tells what type of applications they're using to track their COVID response. Now we go all the way down to the United States. Now, by the way, you read some of these, it's just insane because, like China doesn't care, about human rights. So here's most data being used is from apps that have permission to log users' location. So again, this gives you some idea about this global issue is being addressed by tracking not only you, but everybody associated with you. So remember when we talked about Facebook, there were some issues that were being, they were saying your friends, and now your friends' friends now are associated with you, and there was a big privacy issue on that.
Yeah.
Think about this. There's a demonstrator that has been identified, and so they've been tracing everybody who's been in contact with a person, which just so happens at the the Piggly Wiggly. I was standing next to this guy at the checkout counter. Suddenly I'm under investigation as being associated with a terrorist organization, and I'm going to start getting investigated. Could I lose my job? I don't know. Could I make somebody else lose their job by standing next to them and saying, you know what, I'm going to say I'm infected, so you're infected, so you have to be quarantined. And by the way, now because we're the protections of stay at home are being released, employers are no longer going, oh, take off as much time as you need. We're going to do whatever you need to do. Now it's like, no, you got to be in the office because we need our business to be sustained. So it's just strife with problems. And again, if we go back to the privacy, I'm going to make statements that are just Eric statements, right? You're going to be tracked without your consent. You're going to be associated with everybody around you. You're going to have possible privacy concerns when it related to when are they going to sunset the data? The answer is never. When are they going to do a security audit and assessment of the application? Now, could you open source it? Some are open sourcing it, but most aren't. So I got to rely on some state level developer to create an app that's going to protect my data in a centralized location. And federal government with three letters don't have that down. I can't imagine the resources are there for cities who now are doing multi-million-dollar deficits for their tax base, for revenues, because the economy just shut down. Now this person with no resources, no money, no staff. Oh, by the way, you need to program an app, but security is your top priority. It needs to be done tomorrow. It's a perfect storm. And so, I don't want to just say, oh my God. What I think we need to do as security professionals is, one, be aware. The reason I think this is a very timely podcast, and I really, like you said, we would discuss different topics today, and I'm passionate about a lot of things, but talk about, I think something needs to be up in your face right now, not only for just security professionals, but citizens of the world, is accountability. We need transparency. We need governance and oversight, because I would say that there should be a rolling 30 days. The data of your location should be deleted after 30 days because it's a 14-day incubation period. So why are you keeping this for 6-7 years? Well, I've been in business for 20 years, well, more than that, but for security for 20 years. I will tell you, it's not the adds and deletes of user accounts that are the problem. It's normally the provisioning of users as they transition in a company, right? So it's the janitor effect, where after 15 years, the janitor has the highest level of credential because they've been there that long, but they have more access than the CEO. The same thing here. It's not the add and delete of data that's the problem. It is, how do you archive and do data retention once the data is there, and it's going to be messed up. I've done enough audits and assessments to know that those data sets are not going to be automatically sunsetted. So now this data is sitting out there ripe for the pickings, you know, and phishing emails are going to come. Somebody's going to click it, and then suddenly now your HIPAA data is out there. Everybody you know, everybody's in contact. And here's something to think about, right? In the city of Irving, we have undercover detectives, and you know we do you know certain things for the drug cartel kind of things, gangs, and such forth. Having an undercover detective, having that app where they can be traced wherever they are, and then that data is exposed, puts that officer, his life at risk, and all those around him. So, you know, again, you talk to the Department of Health and Human Services and say, oh my goodness, you can't do this because you're going to kill people. They're going to be like, no, it's made to make everybody happy and healthy. No, you're now going to provide details of where this detective lives, who they've come in contact with, all his relatives. Wow. And so that's just one case, you know, use case, right? There's thousands of them out there where this is a bad idea. And the beauty of it is, the tragedy of this is, it's not effective anyway. After all of that, we're putting all this at risk, all the privacy concerns, everything else. I go back to what I started with. Is it really going to reduce the infection rate? And with all the false positives, nobody installing it willingly, no, I don't see so. So that's where I think this discussion needs to happen. I think we need to start asking questions. I think we need to hold, I think, the federal government accountable. And again, this isn't a political debate. I'm not Republican, Democrat. I don't care. What I'm saying is,
No, this
if you have
sounds more like just human rights is what you're talking about.
Yes, because if we have a single standard or a single way of assessing the security and centralized, you know, kind of accountability, I just believe you have a little bit higher level of success for the protection of the privacy of those citizens that are going to be tracked. So that's where, you know, I think this is a timely discussion, and that's my concern. Like, what am I dialed in today? My spidey senses are just freaking out on how this could go bad or has gone bad. Minnesota.
Yep.
And you think that's the only one that's been discovered, right?
As of now, yeah, right. Yeah.
So
Robin says privacy is an illusion. I agree.
yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, again, we'll go back to the and here's a debate, right? So if my social security number has been released to the dark web because of either the IRS compromise of 580 million citizens and or the insurance compromises, right? My social security number is out there, right? It's a Google search in an onion search away. Do I give up? Do I say, well, you know what? Who cares? I'll just put it on the side of a truck and sell, you know, security protection, you know, oops. But you know, I think it's an illusion, but I want to tell you that most of our society is the way it is, and the stability of it is based on that illusion. What prevents somebody from doing these horrific, catastrophic things? It's the illusion of security. It's accountability, and that's where you walk down a store aisle, and you assume that person that's walking up the aisle is not going to run the cart into you. Right? You drive on the road, and there's nothing preventing somebody from just swerving into your lane and crashing into you because they're having a bad day.
All right.
So the entire society that we have, and I'm not, you know, Rob and I go back a long way, and I love her and her context, and I'm not disagreeing with it. I'm just simply saying it's a necessary evil, and I don't want to put my head in the sand, but on the same token is, yeah, and I don't know, you know, what do you balance it with? Not caring because it's already out there, or do you panic every time something happens?
Yeah. So I mean, so how much do we actually care about privacy? Like as a collective, like because you know we download that app, we say approve all, we keep on downloading new apps, we approve all, approve. Who cares? Who cares? I got like 16 Alexas in my house. Don't say anything, Alexa. Like who cares? So
well,
because we'll always sacrifice privacy for removing friction, for making our lives easier, faster, doing tasks much more efficiently. We'll always
okay, but that's the entire focus of security.
Yeah.
You can't eliminate risk. You reduce it to acceptable levels. The golden question is, what is that acceptable level? Convenience over security. Now, here's the beauty about that. There lies the question between the EU and GDPR in the United States. How does the United States value privacy? We don't. You're a commodity. You're bought and sold like a piece of equipment. You're monetized. If you don't pay for something, you are that currency. Now, the United States hasn't had a systemic history of genocide based on who you are, right? There's in general terms. But in the EU, with the World War II and so forth, being who you are, where you're from, and so forth, would impact whether you survived. So in the EU, there is a cultural, slide towards privacy. And that's why GDPR happened. And that's why it is taken very seriously in the EU, because they don't commercialize you as a entity, as a just a thing. In the United States, the reason why we don't have a federal law is because there's too many organizations making too much money selling me as a commodity. And so that's why it's just simply not going to happen. We're going to continue to be that as long as it's fiscally not viable for companies like, these internet organizations.
Right. No, that's an interesting point you brought up about, whatever's happened in the past in history, right? We always know history repeats itself. So who's not to say that there isn't another genocide plan one day based on the data that they're collecting now, right? I mean, those are hard questions that we probably need to be asking.
Well, and I've only addressed maybe a handful of use cases, but when you start being discriminated against because of the color of a logo on an app, or because of who you've associated, or where you shop, or your demographic, which we know is disproportionately impacting minorities right now, all those things can be achieved through this tracing app and the methodology. We start looking at the ability to discriminate based on who you are, where you are, and who you know. That's wow. Take a book out of Germany in World War II. You are going to be discriminated against about who you are, where you are, and who you know. And again, I don't want to go down a whole political rabbit hole, but as you said, if we do not learn from history, we are doomed to repeat it. And as I look through recent activities in 2020 and over the last 3 years, I just see us sliding towards a result that we may not fully want or embrace, simply because of some of the restrictions that, again, the road to hell isn't paved with fire and brimstone. It's going to be glittery and lighty, right? So you're going to walk through it going, oh wow, this is an awesome place. So it's paved with good intentions, and I think the tracing app is good intentions without understanding the problem. I think it was Bruce Schneier, and by the way, I met him. Oh, awesome guy. I didn't know he was like 4'1", but he is. Anyway, Bruce Schneier, great security professional. He once said, if you implement a technology to solve a security problem, you don't know the technology and you don't know the security problem, right? So you're implementing these apps and these, this technology to solve this COVID tracing problem. You certainly don't know the app and the limitations of it. And you certainly don't know the problem. The problem is, how do you correctly identify and communicate potential impacts without creating mass panic? And the way it's being implemented and the proposed implementations I don't think support that functionality. And the risk is just significant about the misuse of data, and how it's going to be and is currently. And Minnesota is a good example. Wow. Because you look at all these reality shows, NCIS and everything else, and you always got the red string that connects all the pictures of the gang, right?
Right.
You don't need string anymore, right? Everybody's going to have their app, and it's just going to be a matter of, and so there's the challenge, right? If you have a police state, the crime is pretty low, right? But now you have a police state, and so you have to start understanding about, when you start having government oversight that is unconstitutional.
Yeah, are they actually gonna enforce you to, like, stay in your home just because of this app says that you came in near proximity to someone else that has the disease, just because they said, right?
Yep. Well, and
It's just because the data says so.
again, take the technology away from it, that question is currently being rioted in a lot of states where it's like, you don't have a legal right to stop me from going to church. I'm going to church. Oh, I'm infected and I'm going to infect it. And how many churches? We have to notify 200 people who now have COVID. Well, I went to church, okay, you have a constitutional right. So the app doesn't really change the underlying social, psychological problem, which is I don't, civil liberties and civil rights, right? As long as I'm not impacting you, then I can do, the Constitution, I have my rights, right? My freedom of speech and all these other, as long as it doesn't impact you. Well, a COVID infection is a little bit less, it's got reactive. It's more 14 days worth, right? So it's not like, okay, I'm, assaulting you directly. But what I am doing is I'm killing your dad because he lives with you and he's immune compromised. I'm going to infect you because I have a constitutional right not to wear a mask. You're now infected asymptomatic because you're young, and you just gave it to your immune compromised father. So there it is. Am I guilty of second-degree manslaughter?
Probably not.
I don't know. I mean, if I knew that I was infected with COVID and I went out to a facility and said, you know what, I am legally allowed to be here and I don't have to legally tell you that I'm infected. There's intent.
Yeah. I think,
again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm just saying that,
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, my only suggestion that I take myself is just, doing the right thing, right? Whatever that means for you, but doing the right thing is always the right thing. And I wouldn't want that on my conscience, knowing that I had it, knowing that I give someone. And if I like, imagine if you knew, imagine just pretend like it was all exposed and we all knew what you did and you knew what you did. If you could actually see the end of the rabbit trail of like, I went to church and I killed 53 people, right? Like if you
Right.
actually could see that, would you be okay with that? And if the answer is no, then maybe you shouldn't do it.
Well, I'm not going to get Father of the Year award by any means, but one of the things I try to instill in all my children is integrity is doing the right thing, even though no one will know.
Yep.
Okay. And whether you're religious, whether it's just whatever it may be, it is, you got to sleep at night, right? And I have got to believe I have to wake up every morning and do my job, which is like a lot of peace officers and first responders. You don't always see the good side of everybody, right? But I got to wake up and believe the majority of our society is going to do the right thing, right? But the problem is sensationalism, yellow journalism. It's not the good that normally makes the news. It's how do I get the last click? And that click is going to be on the 2% of the society that doesn't do it. So it is kind of hard to get, this positive outlook when you're constantly hearing about those people who are, assaulting a store owner because they were asked to in a private, it's a private location, right? They have the right to refuse service to anybody. They said, please leave. We want our employees to be safe. And they get their arm broken. That's not the 99%. I hope, I pray. But you gotta, it's always hope for the best, plan for the worst. You have to realize that person's going to come into your store. That person is going to probably not, adhere to that integrity and things that you would like everybody to do.
Yeah, no, powerful stuff, Eric. Well, I appreciate the conversation today about cybersecurity, human rights, and philosophy. Couldn't imagine that we would have meshed all three of those together, but we did. So kudos, bravo. That was well done. Before we wrap up, what would you have asked yourself in my shoes that I didn't already ask you? Just make sure I leave no stone unturned.
Oh my God, you didn't put this in the pre-interview questions.
Yeah.
What do I use to help protect my privacy as a person?
And what is it?
I think the biggest, my advice to a lot of people is get yourself a password manager and a password vault. By using that technology, you prevent not only a password compromise being distributed across all your accounts, but another thing people don't realize is that it auto-populates, most of the password managers auto-populates your login credential when you go to a website. If you go to google.com, but instead of an O, it's a 0, it won't pre-populate it. It's not the right domain. So you can also make sure that you're not being, moved to a site that you're not aware of. So there's other advantages as well. But I have my father has dementia, and so for him, it just doesn't. He can't remember those passwords, so he doesn't have to. He remembers a phrase that is entered once, and then he's able to do the things that he'd like to do without having to interact. So from a privacy perspective, well, maybe it's more, confidentiality. Yeah, I would say your use of a password manager, if I could give anybody a tip, if you don't use one, it becomes a necessity. There you
Awesome.
go.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that, Eric. Thank you for the time today, for sure.
But thank you for
Uh,
having me.
yeah, and absolutely. And before I let everybody else go, I do want to point out real quickly, as I forgot earlier in the show, on June 4th, 5 p.m., we're having a ElevateXchange virtual happy hour moderated by Rusty Kennington, guest panelists Brandy Holbert, Pat Benoit, Tom Sweet, and Elizabeth Hexel. Again, June 4th, 5 p.m. The link to register is going to be in the comments here on LinkedIn. I'm going to post that right now for us. So if you guys are an IT director or above and you're watching the show here, please consider signing up for ElevateXchange and joining us for the happy hour on June 4th. So with that, Eric, excellent show today. Appreciate it, man.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. So anytime, man. I love your show. I love being dialed in.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and thanks everyone for tuning in today. Appreciate it, Robin, Brad, and yeah, thanks so much, guys. Nick, Royce, appreciate it.